May 30th, 1942, 3:42 p.m., Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The air smells like hot steel and salt water. You can hear the grinders before you see the ship. USS Yorktown, CV-5, slides into the harbor wounded, listing slightly, her once clean lines scarred by bomb damage from the Coral Sea. Smoke stains still cling to her island. Flight deck planking is splintered. The scars are fresh enough that you can still taste them in the air. Men on the pier stop what they're doing and stare. This carrier is supposed to be dead. Just days earlier, Japanese dive bombers had punched holes through her decks, ruptured fuel lines, wrecked boilers, knocked out electrical systems. Intelligence estimates said 3 months of repairs, minimum, maybe longer. The Navy's own paperwork had already started to categorize her as non-operational. But now she's here, and there is no time. Inside the Pacific Fleet Command building, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz is staring at maps that don't leave room for hope. Red pins mark Japanese carrier groups pushing east. Intercepted messages, fragmentary, imperfect, urgent, suggest an attack coming soon. Midway, a trap, or an opportunity, or both. The math is brutal. The U.S. Navy has 3 carriers available in the Pacific: Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, if she can sail. Without Yorktown, the balance tilts the wrong way. With her, maybe, just maybe, the United States can meet Japan on something closer to even terms. But Yorktown is broken, deeply broken, and someone has to decide whether to treat her like a patient or like a weapon. That decision comes quietly. No speech, no ceremony, just an order passed down the chain. Get her ready, as fast as humanly possible. At Pearl Harbor Navy Yard, the order hits like an electric shock. Civilian ship fitters, welders, pipe fitters, electricians, carpenters, men who had been repairing ships at a measured, methodical pace, suddenly find themselves inside a different kind of war, one measured in hours, not weeks. There are no full inspections, no perfect fixes, only triage. Teams swarm the carrier before her lines are fully secured. Ladders slam against the hull. Tools clatter onto decks still warm from recent action. Damage control officers move fast, clipboards already outdated, calling out priorities over the noise. Boilers first. No, power distribution. Fuel leaks here. Mark it. Patch, don't replace. Every decision is a gamble. Replace a system properly and you lose days. Patch it, and you risk failure at sea. Somewhere below Gex, a welder crawls into a space barely wide enough to breathe, sparks showering his boots as he seals a ruptured bulkhead that should be replaced entirely. Nearby, electricians reroute cables through paths they were never designed to take, sketching solutions directly onto steel with chalk. This isn't textbook repair. This is combat engineering. The shipyard superintendent gathers his foreman and says the words everyone is thinking, but no one wants to hear. You have 72 hours, not to finish the job, to make her fight. Men work double shifts, then triple shifts. When one collapses, another steps into his place. Coffee runs out, someone brings more. Food is eaten standing up, leaning against tool chests. Hands bleed. Nobody stops. On the flight deck, damaged planks are torn up and replaced just enough to support aircraft landings. Below, boiler tubes are patched, valves bypassed, safety margins erased one by one. The ship will not be safe. It will be possible, and that is enough. Word spreads fast through the yard. This isn't just another carrier. This is Yorktown, the ship that fought at Coral Sea, that absorbed punishment meant for others. Men who worked on her before come back voluntarily, knowing exactly what she's been through. There's no illusion here. Everyone understands the stakes. If they fail,
Yorktown doesn't sail. If Yorktown doesn't sail, Midway may fall. If Midway falls, the Pacific War stretches into something far darker. Time becomes the enemy. Every hour that passes is one the enemy fleet is using to move, to plan, to assume Yorktown is out of the fight. And that assumption, right or wrong, may decide everything. By the first night, floodlights turn the carrier into a glowing island of noise and motion. Sparks rain into the harbor. The smell of ozone and burning insulation hangs thick. Sailors still assigned to the ship move among the yard workers, learning what's been fixed and what's being ignored. One officer asks quietly, "Will she hold together?" The answer comes back just as quietly. She doesn't have to hold forever. She just has to make it to the fight. Somewhere in the darkness, Admiral Nimitz receives progress updates. He listens. He doesn't interrupt. When the reports end, he asks one question. Can she launch planes? Not, is she fully repaired? Not, is she safe? Just that. The answer for now is uncertain. And hanging over everything is the enemy's clock. The Japanese believe Yorktown is finished. Intelligence reports from their side will soon reflect that confidence. Their operational plans assume one less American carrier. That belief is about to become a liability. But only if this impossible repair holds together long enough. At Pearl Harbor, the grinders keep screaming. The welders keep working. And USS Yorktown waits, half alive, half broken, while men race time itself. Because somewhere beyond the horizon, an enemy fleet is already moving, and the window to shock them is closing fast.
By the second night, Pearl Harbor Navy Yard no longer looks like a shipyard. It looks like a siege. Floodlights burn through the darkness, throwing harsh white glare across Yorktown's scarred hull. Sparks arc through the air like tracer fire. The steady hammering of steel on steel never stops. Not at midnight, not at dawn, not when the men's hands begin to shake from exhaustion. Inside the carrier, the heat is unbearable. Boiler rooms are choked with steam and sweat. Men work stripped to undershirts, faces blackened, eyes stinging. Pipes that should be replaced are wrapped, sealed, braced, anything to keep pressure where it belongs. A chief machinist's mate runs his hand along a vibrating line and feels something wrong. He doesn't report it. He tightens the clamp and moves on. There is no time for perfection. The Navy's repair manuals might as well be fiction now. This is not scheduled maintenance. This is battlefield surgery performed dockside, without anesthesia, while the patient insists on standing up. Above, on the flight deck, carpenters race against splintered wood and twisted steel. Bomb damage from Coral Sea had blown holes straight through the deck. Proper repair would mean weeks, new beams, full structural alignment. Instead, damaged sections are cut away and replaced just enough to support landing gear. No one says it out loud, but everyone knows the truth. A hard landing could reopen those wounds. Below decks, electricians reroute power through emergency circuits never meant to handle full loads. Switchboards are bypassed, redundancies are sacrificed. When a system comes online, it stays online. Not because it's perfect, but because there's no guarantee it will survive another shutdown. Every repair is a trade. Speed for safety, function for longevity, now for later. Yorktown's damage control officer walks the ship with a notebook that fills faster than it can be read. Fires extinguished, flooding contained, structural integrity acceptable. That word keeps appearing. Acceptable for combat, acceptable for now, but not acceptable for peace. In the shipyard offices, coordination becomes its own battle. Parts are scarce. The supply chain wasn't built for this. Someone has the idea to strip components from other ships, destroyers, cruisers, even carriers undergoing routine maintenance. Requests are approved instantly. No paperwork delays, no debates. Take what you need. Somewhere in the yard, a crane operator swings a massive steel plate into place. Below him, welders signal frantically, hands moving fast, knowing one mistake could crush a man flat. The plate settles. Sparks fly.
Another wound closed. The ship is being held together by judgment calls. On the pier, a junior officer watches Yorktown's island glow under floodlights and realizes something unsettling. This isn't just a repair effort. It's an experiment. Can you manufacture time? Can you compress days into days? Can coordination replace material? Can human effort bend the schedule of war? No one knows the answer yet. Word reaches Admiral Nimitz that Yorktown may be operational sooner than expected. He doesn't celebrate. He knows what operational really means. He's betting that the Japanese are making the same assumption everyone else would, that a carrier hit like Yorktown was hit cannot be back in action so quickly. That assumption is now the U.S. Navy's most valuable weapon. Intelligence reports filter in. Japanese carrier groups are moving. Midway is the target. The timeline is tightening. There is no margin left. Back aboard Yorktown, aviation crews begin prepping aircraft even before repairs are complete. Fighters and dive bombers are moved, secured, repositioned. Some of the planes that will launch from this deck will do so knowing the ship beneath them is still unfinished. Fuel lines are tested, leaks patched again and again. A test run of the engines is ordered. Deep inside the hull, turbines begin to turn, slowly at first, then faster. The ship vibrates. Men hold their breath. Gauges twitch. Someone watches a pressure reading climb past what feels comfortable. No one calls it off. Yorktown does not fail. She groans. She rattles. But she holds. Cheers break out in places where men forgot cheering was an option. Still, the most dangerous test remains. Can she fly planes? On the morning of May 31st, with repairs still ongoing in parts of the ship, the order is given. Launch one aircraft, just one. The deck crew moves with careful speed. The pilot knows what this moment means, not just for him, but for the entire Pacific War. Engines roar, the deck trembles, the aircraft rolls. For a moment, it feels like the ship itself is holding its breath. Then, the aircraft lifts off cleanly into the Hawaiian sky. A second launch follows, then a third. Yorktown can fight. Not perfectly, not safely, but decisively. That afternoon, final decisions are made. There will be no more time. Repairs that aren't finished will remain unfinished. Risks that haven't been eliminated will sail with the ship. At 9 p.m., Yorktown's lines are cast off. She leaves Pearl Harbor still smelling of fresh welds and hot paint, carrying the fingerprints of hundreds of exhausted men embedded into her steel. The shipyard crews stand along the pier, watching silently as the carrier eases into the channel. They don't wave. They don't cheer. They understand something most of the world does not yet know. This ship was not repaired. She was rebuilt against time, and now she's heading straight towards the enemy, towards an engagement the Japanese believe she can possibly not be part of. The clock the enemy is using is already wrong, and in a few days, they're going to discover just how wrong it is.
June 2nd, 1942. Somewhere west of Hawaii. The ocean is deceptively calm. From the bridge of USS Yorktown, the Pacific stretches flat and endless, sunlight glinting off waves that give no hint of what's coming. But inside the ship, nothing feels calm. Every vibration, every unfamiliar sound is measured, judged, feared. The carrier is moving faster now, not at full power, but fast enough to test the repairs that were never meant to last this long. Below decks, engineering crews listen to the ship the way doctors listen to a patient's breathing. They feel the hull through their boots. They memorize the rhythm of the engines. When something sounds wrong, they don't panic. They isolate it. They adjust. They improvise. Yorktown is no longer just a warship. She's a wager. Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, flying his flag aboard Yorktown, understands exactly what kind of gamble this is. He's been told, carefully, diplomatically, that the ship is operational. He's also been told what that word really means. She will not survive another Coral Sea. One more bomb in the wrong place, one torpedo through an already stressed compartment, one failure cascading into another. But Fletcher also understands something else. The Japanese do not know Yorktown is here. Their planning assumes 2 American carriers at Midway, not 3.
That assumption shapes everything: where they place their carriers, how they spread their air patrols, how confident they feel about absorbing losses. War plans are built on expectations. Break those expectations, and even the strongest force can stumble. Yorktown's presence is not about firepower alone. It's about surprise. On June 3rd, reconnaissance reports begin to confirm the worst and the best at the same time. Japanese forces are approaching Midway exactly as predicted. The trap is real, and now the pieces are moving into position. On Yorktown's flight deck, pilots gather around briefing boards, studying grainy photos and estimated positions. Some of them notice the repairs, the patched deck planks, the fresh welds, the areas marked off limits because no one is sure what will happen if they're stressed again. No one complains. They know what ship they're standing on. They know she wasn't supposed to be here. That knowledge sharpens everything. Aviation ordnance crews load bombs and torpedoes, working around damage control teams still reinforcing bulkheads. Fuel hoses snake across the deck. Aircraft are moved and secured again and again as the ship maneuvers to stay concealed. Yorktown is operating in a state of controlled fragility, and everyone aboard understands the unspoken rule. If she's hit again, there may not be time to fix her. June 4th begins before sunrise. The air is heavy, warm, quiet in the way that only exists before violence. Pilots strap in under dim deck lights. Engines cough, then roar. Somewhere in the distance, the Japanese fleet is already launching its own aircraft, confident, methodical, unaware. At first light, Yorktown launches her strike. Planes rise from a deck that should have been in dry dock. The ship's patched systems hold. Steam pressure stays within limits. Electrical loads don't spike. The carrier behaves just enough. And then the enemy finds her. Japanese dive bombers break through the American combat air patrol, screaming down from altitude. Alarms blare. Men run. Anti-aircraft guns open fire, tracers clawing at the sky. Yorktown shudders as the first bomb hits. Then another. Explosions rip through the flight deck, punching straight into spaces that were only barely repaired days earlier. Fires ignite instantly. Smoke floods compartments. The ship lists as flooding spreads. This is the moment everyone feared. Damage control teams respond automatically, training taking over where fear would otherwise paralyze. Hoses are run, bulkheads sealed, fires fought inch by inch. For a moment, it looks like Yorktown is finished after all. The order comes down: prepare to abandon ship. Men gather at stations, watching smoke roll across the deck they launched from hours earlier. Some look back towards the island, others stare at the water. Then something unexpected happens. The fires begin to come under control. Flooding stabilizes. Power, patched, rerouted, fragile, returns to critical systems. Yorktown refuses to die. Against all logic, she steadies. The list slows. Damage control reports filter upward, cautious but hopeful. She's holding. The abandoned ship order is rescinded. On the Japanese side, pilots report something that confuses their commanders. An American carrier they believe destroyed is still fighting, still launching aircraft, still absorbing punishment. It doesn't make sense. And that confusion costs them time. Time that American pilots use to find their carriers. Time that allows dive bombers to arrive over the Japanese fleet at exactly the wrong moment. Within minutes, the balance of the battle shifts. Japanese carriers erupt in flame. Decks packed with fueled and armed aircraft become infernos. The enemy's carefully timed operation collapses into chaos. Yorktown, battered and bleeding, has done her job. Not by being invincible, but by being present. It absorbed attention. It drew attacks. It existed where the enemy believed it could not. That presence helped crack the timetable Japan depended on. Later that day, Yorktown will finally take the hit she cannot survive, a submarine torpedo that seals her fate. But by then, the battle is already decided. The repair crews back in Pearl Harbor will never see this moment. They won't hear the explosions or smell the smoke, but every weld they rushed, every shortcut they risked, every decision they made under floodlights and exhaustion, those choices are now echoing across the Pacific. Because sometimes victory isn't about building the strongest weapon, it's about building one fast enough. And Yorktown was fast enough to change history.
The afternoon sun hangs high over the Pacific, but the light feels different now. Smoke columns rise where Japanese carriers once moved with precision. The ocean is littered with debris, wreckage, fuel slicks, fragments of aircraft that never had a chance to take off. What was supposed to be a carefully timed Japanese operation has unraveled into something chaotic and irreversible. And USS Yorktown, the ship that was never meant to be here, is still afloat. Barely. Below decks, damage control teams are running on instinct and muscle memory. Fires are out, for now. Flooding is contained, but only because men are standing knee-deep in water, bracing bulkheads with whatever they can find. Wooden beams, scrap metal, anything that buys another minute. You can almost feel the tension in the air. Not fear, responsibility. Yorktown has already paid for her presence. Bomb hits have reopened old wounds. Systems that were patched in haste are failing exactly the way the shipyard crews feared they might. Power flickers, communications falter. The carrier's silhouette looks wrong, slightly lower in the water, scarred, tired. But she's done what she needed to do. Above, American aircraft return from their strikes. Some land, some ditch, some never come back. Pilots who trap aboard Yorktown step out onto a deck that smells of smoke and fresh splinters, glancing at the damage and realizing how close they came to not having a deck at all. Then comes the quiet moment, the moment between disasters. Somewhere below the surface, a Japanese submarine is stalking. At 2:20 p.m., without warning, the ocean erupts along Yorktown's port side. The torpedo hits where the ship is weakest, areas already stressed by earlier damage. The shock is violent. The carrier shudders as if struck by a hammer from below. This time, there is no patch. Flooding spreads faster than teams can respond. Compartments fill. The list increases sharply. Power goes out for good. The ship begins to die in earnest. Orders are given quickly now, calmly. There is no confusion. Abandon ship. Men move to stations they practiced for but never expected to use this way. Some look back toward the island one last time. Others stare at the water, calculating the jump. Yorktown is finished. But here's the truth that settles over everyone involved, from the sailors climbing down ropes into the sea, to the officers watching from nearby ships, to the planners back at Pearl Harbor who will soon get the reports. Yorktown doesn't need to survive this day. She already won it. The Japanese timetable is shattered. 4 enemy carriers are lost. Veteran air crews are gone. The momentum that carried Japan across the Pacific has been broken in a matter of hours. And the enemy cannot understand how. They believed Yorktown destroyed. They believed American carriers reduced. They believed time was on their side. They were wrong. Time had been stolen from them, quietly and violently, by welders, electricians, and planners who turned speed into a weapon. As Yorktown settles lower in the water, her crew is picked up by escorting ships, faces streaked with oil and sweat, eyes burning from smoke and exhaustion. Some men look back at the carrier as she lists, unwilling to look away. She sinks slowly over the next day, not in flames, not dramatically, just steadily, relentlessly, like a ship that has already finished her work. Back at Pearl Harbor, the repair crews will hear the news secondhand. Yorktown is gone. There will be no celebrations, no medals handed out on the spot.
just quiet nods among men who understand what they accomplished. They didn't save the ship, they saved the moment. And that moment changed the war. But the consequences of that stolen time, the shock it delivered, the way it bent strategy and morale, are only beginning to ripple outward. Because when an enemy realizes you can do the impossible faster than they can plan for it, the war stops feeling predictable. And nothing is more dangerous than that. News of the battle doesn't arrive all at once. It moves in fragments, intercepts, after-action reports, damaged aircraft limping home, officers comparing notes late into the night. But as the picture sharpens, something deeper than victory settles into the Pacific War. The enemy did not just lose ships, they lost confidence in the clock. On the Japanese side, staff officers begin reconstructing what went wrong. Timetables are re-examined, assumptions are questioned. Carrier counts that were believed certain suddenly aren't. Somewhere in those calculations, one fact refuses to fit. Yorktown was supposed to be gone. Her loss at Coral Sea had been accepted. Her absence was built into plans. The Americans should have arrived at Midway with fewer decks, fewer aircraft, fewer options. Instead, a damaged carrier appeared where none should exist and absorbed blows meant for others. That realization spreads quietly but relentlessly through Japanese command channels. It doesn't produce panic, it produces unease, the sense that American capacity cannot be measured the way Japanese planners are used to measuring strength. You can almost feel that shift, the moment when strategy stops being about maneuver and starts being about uncertainty. Back in the United States, the reaction is different. There are headlines, yes, celebrations, a surge of morale, but beneath the surface, within Navy yards and planning offices, Midway becomes a case study, not in heroics, but in process. Yorktown's repair is dissected in detail, not as a miracle, as a method. Who authorized decisions, who cut corners and which corners held, how many men worked how many hours, which parts mattered and which didn't. The lesson is clear. Speed can be engineered, not recklessly, deliberately. What happened at Pearl Harbor was not luck, it was coordination, leadership willing to accept risk, labor organized without friction, supply chains flexible enough to be bent without breaking. From this point forward, American logistics begin to operate with a different mindset. Ships are repaired faster, turnaround times shrink, damage control doctrine evolves. The idea that something is too damaged becomes less absolute. If it can float, it can fight. If it can fight, it can matter. And somewhere inside that shift is the ghost of Yorktown, unfinished, imperfect, but decisive. For the men who worked those frantic days in May, the war moves on without ceremony. New ships arrive, new carriers take Yorktown's place, bigger, stronger, safer. But none of them will ever again be allowed the luxury of time, because now speed has proven itself, and once an enemy learns that you can compress months into days, the psychological balance tilts. Planning becomes guesswork, timetables become fragile. Yorktown's true legacy isn't the bombs she absorbed, it's the doubt she planted. A doubt that will grow with every carrier launched faster than expected, every repair completed ahead of schedule, every operation that arrives before the enemy believes it can. Time has become something the United States can manufacture, and that realization, on both sides, marks a turning point far larger than a single ship.
Long after the smoke clears at Midway, after the maps are redrawn and the casualty lists finalized, the story of USS Yorktown continues to echo in quieter places. In shipyards, in planning rooms, in decisions made under pressure where perfection is impossible. The men who repaired Yorktown do not become famous. There are no dramatic photographs of them standing on the flight deck as bombs fall. No after-action reports praise their courage in battle. Most of their names never leave Pearl Harbor, but their work becomes doctrine. Navy planners begin to understand something fundamental. Industrial power isn't just about output, it's about responsiveness. the ability to decide faster than the enemy expects, to act before intelligence is complete, to accept calculated risk in exchange for operational surprise. Yorktown's repair becomes a template, not copied exactly, but studied. The Navy refines damage assessment protocols. Repair authority is pushed lower in the chain of command. Civilian labor and military planning are woven together more tightly. Spare parts inventories are reorganized to prioritize flexibility over neat accounting. From this point forward, American carriers will still take damage. They will still burn. They will still be lost. But fewer will be written off too early. The people who welded Yorktown back together taught the Navy that a ship is not just steel and machinery. It is a decision about whether time will be spent or seized. For the sailors who abandoned Yorktown into the Pacific, the war continues elsewhere. Many are reassigned to new carriers that arrive in astonishing numbers. Essex-class decks replace Yorktown's silhouette. Bigger ships, faster construction, improved survivability. Yet among those men there is always a quiet understanding. They were part of something singular. They stood on a ship that should not have existed at Midway. They felt the deck shudder under bombs that landed because Yorktown was present, drawing fire away from others. They survived because time was bent in their favor. And for the Japanese Navy, that bend in time leaves a scar. Planning grows cautious. Assumptions are hedged. The certainty that once guided operations fades. American capacity no longer feels measurable, no longer predictable. Because if a carrier can be raised from near death in 3 days, what else can be done faster than expected? The Pacific War stretches on, brutal and costly, but the initiative never truly returns to Japan. The tempo belongs to the United States now, and tempo, once seized, is hard to surrender.
In the months that follow Midway, the Pacific War does not suddenly become easy. It becomes inevitable. New carriers arrive, new air groups form, new offensives roll forward across islands whose names will soon be etched into history. But underneath every movement, every operation, every decision, there is an invisible force shaping the outcome. Time. The Japanese Navy still has skill, still has courage, still has ships and crews willing to fight to the end, but something essential has been taken from them, something they never fully recover: predictability. Yorktown's return shattered the idea that American losses could be neatly calculated, that damage equaled delay, that destruction equaled absence. From Midway onward, Japanese planners must assume the unexpected: ships returning too soon, forces arriving too early, pressure applied before defenses are ready. And assumptions are everything in war. Back in the United States, Yorktown's story quietly spreads through training manuals and command briefings, not as legend, as instruction. Officers learn that speed is not recklessness, it is coordination under risk. That a dead asset may still have decisive value if restored just enough, just in time. The people who manufactured that time, yard workers, supervisors, planners, commanders willing to accept imperfection, become part of a system that now understands its own strength. It is not just production, it is adaptation. Yorktown herself rests at the bottom of the Pacific, her hull slowly dissolving into silence, but the decision that sent her to Midway lives on. Every rapid turnaround, every forward repair base, every carrier launched sooner than expected carries her imprint. She proved something the enemy never truly grasped until it was too late. Wars are not only won by firepower, they are won by those who can move faster than reality expects. At Midway, Japan lost carriers, but at Pearl Harbor, days earlier, Japan lost the timetable. And once time turns against you, there is no way to get it back. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to let us know. A simple like helps this history reach people who may never have heard it. It tells the algorithm that these moments still matter. Subscribe if you want to stay with us. Here, we uncover the moments in the Second World War when everything changed, when there was no return. These are not just battles. They are human realizations, sacrifices, and truths buried beneath decades of noise. If you feel comfortable, leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. The United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or somewhere else entirely. Tell us if someone in your family lived through this war. You're not just watching a video, you're helping keep these memories alive. Because once the stories disappear, there really is no return. Thank you for watching.